certainly from the south. And you know, that's always a cool thing when you have areas in of human migration that often create little pinch points. So you have oceans or mountains that kind of guide people into an area. You see things that are unique to that area. I mean, certainly the areas of Alto Adige, Friuli, Venezia Giulia, these are areas that have grapes that in later times made it north to Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Eastern Europe, other parts of France. I mean, this was a congregation. So there's a lot of stuff that happened here that did translate further. I mean, did get carried further north, but in some respects only stayed here. So I like this area a lot. There's a lot going on. Great food, great wine. So let's get into it. The first wine we're going to taste is a wine from the region of Soave. And unfortunately, the problem with a lot of old world wine regions is that the wines are not defined by varietal. So you don't see Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc, neither of which are used in high quantities here. But for the sake of argument, you don't see the grape on the label. You see a location. So the region of Soave, if you are at the coast of the Adriatic, you really, actually, the easy way to think about it is Veneto is two sides. So you have a side that is closer to the Adriatic and a side that is closer to Lake Garda. And the region of Veneto, the region of Soave is closer to Lake Garda. And this grape, this is actually a blend of two grapes. One of them is Garganega. And Garganega does have some origins further south. There are similar grapes found in southern Italy, but Garganega is the main grape of Soave. By law, it has to be at least 70% Garganega. It can be 30% other grapes. There's a grape, and this one has 30% of a grape called Trebbiano, but it's a variant of Trebbiano, not the same Trebbiano that you would find in Tuscany or in Sardinia. But this, so you can blend in other grapes to this, but by law it has to be 70% Garganega. And Garganega loves the mountainous hillsides, and in fact, this particular Soave comes from the Classico region. So Pierpont is a great producer, been around a long time. In fact, 1880, they proudly label that on the bottle. But the Classico region are the hillsides. These are the older, the more established areas where Garganega is grown. And so this is again a cooler region, fairly crisp. You'll notice on the wine it has sort of a citrus, but almost a marzipan or almond note. It's a sweet nuttiness that gives Garganega its signature. And yeah, if you give your glass a swirl and nose that, you'll smell some sort of sweet almond notes. Yeah, it's opening up even more. So Soave, I love it. It's a very food-friendly wine. Again, because it's a cool climate region, fairly bright acidity. Wines that have good acidity tend to pair very well with food. But it's got some things going on. It's got flowers and fruit, and again this very definite, this signature marzipan or sweet almond note to it, but with pastas, brown butter sauce, things from the ocean, certainly lighter seafood preparations. this wine is just really, really, really spot on. It's a very food friendly wine. And you know, I mean, I think it's funny. I sell it in the store. There's a bottle that I have, um, and it's not from the defined region of Soave, but it's Chardonnay and Garganega, and it puts Chardonnay in big letters and it puts Garganega in smaller letters, and we sell a lot of it. And yet this one is true Soave. It doesn't have the Chardonnay. It relies on the Trebbiano, but it could have Chardonnay in it. But because it's labeled Soave and people don't have the familiarity with Soave, that's sort of its downfall. But I think that, you know, definitely, you'll find this to be a really, really, it's not overly expensive. It's got a lot of complexity, and it does very, very well with food. So let's take a sip of this. Yeah, mouth-watering acidity. I mean, the tongue waters, and that's a good thing. You want acid. You want acid with your food wines because it refreshes the palate and kind of preps you for the next bite. But that sweet almond, I can still taste that almond note. Really, really nice. This, like I said, Pirapan, great producer, been around a long time, and does a really nice job. They restrict most of their production to the best regions of Soave. They, like I said, you can do, the Classico wines only come from the hillside vineyards. You can get fruit from the valley. It's just not as good. And I think this does a great job at representing Soave. Any questions on the first wine?
Any thoughts? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Yeah.
Looks generally thumbs up.
Yeah.
I think it's really great. It's really good with food. Did it with a little vegetable and shrimp tart. So
Mhm.
some asparagus and pureed pea and stuff, and it's really good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that
And
and vegetables and things
interesting
like
day.
that. Oh, let's see. Let's everybody remember to mute your speaker.
Mute speaker.
There is a question from Clifton Pye. Can you say something about the geology of the region?
So you're talking about an area that you've got, obviously the Adriatic on one side, which you get, I mean, it obviously the ocean probably, you know, was present in more areas than it is today. And then you've got Lake Garda on the other side, walled in with hills and mountains. So as you know, as the soil degrades, you get more complexity in the soil. So the geology of this area is basically decomposed seabed and decomposed hillsides. So that complexity, I mean, I always struggle because the having wine show minerality. Minerality is something that has long been debated, whether it exists, whether I mean it's I don't think it's like Bigfoot. I think there's probably more validity to it than not. But it is, it's something that I detect in this wine. I mean, if I were blind tasting this, I would probably say cool climate, mountainous, and it's that wet stone minerality that this wine has. Um, it just kind of tingle. I mean, the minerality is it's the sensation that you get when you smell like wet rocks or you smell sea salt. But it's almost, it's a smell, but it's sort of tactile. You smell it in the back of your nose, or you detect it in the back of your nose. But no, this, wine is made in the vineyard, and the complexity of the soil will determine the quality of the wine. And so I mean, hillside vineyards, it's kind of funny. I mean, the general theory on how we became experts in where to plant grapes is that, if you were a farmer hundreds of years ago, and you look at your property, and you've got some property on the valley floor, and you've got hillsides that go up on either side, I think most of us would logically say, well, let's plant crops in the valley, and let's graze animals in the valley, because accessing the hillside is sort of a pain. There's a challenge to that. And so grapes, they didn't need a lot of tending, and over time they realized the grapes were perfectly happy on the hillside. Now, it was probably done for practical reasons initially, because you would want to plant your most valuable land to stuff that you needed. And arguably, I would say you do need wine, but you don't need it the way you need grain and proteins and vegetables. So they actually stumbled into the fact that grapes actually do very well on hillsides. In fact, not just do very well, they thrive. It seems counterintuitive to think that a grape that struggles, that's challenged, that doesn't have a lot of benefits of nutrients and water, and consistent water at least, that would make a better wine, but it does. And so humans have discovered that actually the best wines come from hillsides in most cases, or elevated areas. And this was probably discovered because, again, where we're talking about, humans were like, well, we're here, and we got this flat area that we could plant for the easy stuff that we really need. What can we put in on the hillside? And so this is kind of where that thinking came to be. I mean, further north as well, but the idea that you almost figure out the best use for this land and allocate it, and they discovered that wine actually benefited. So this is very much a product of its environment. I mean, it is, if you didn't have water bordering it, if you didn't have elevated areas where cooler air can wash down the valley, you wouldn't have a wine that has this bright acidity. You would have fruit that would ripen faster than you might want. So maybe we wouldn't get these flavors of almond paste and sweet almond. I mean, that slow ripening is what generates the complexity of the wine. And it just keeps getting more intense. I mean, like I said, this doesn't need a lot. I mean, you could just do, pasta in a brown butter sage sauce, and that would be it. And it would be absolutely wonderful. It vegetables. It loves vegetables. It has a little bit of a vegetal quality in the background, which allows it to pair with those things. So things from the valley pair very well with the fruit from the hillside. Shall we move to any other questions on the white?
I don't see any yet.
Oh, nope. All right. Well, let's move to the red. Now, the red, unfortunately, my goal is to make this a little more simple than it is, but this region is not simple. So the wine that we're tasting today is Valpolicella. And Valpolicella is a style of wine that typically includes Corvina, which is a grape that has a very thin skin. It develops Corvina by itself has very little color. It has very little tannin, but it has really nice acidity. It has a fairly thick skin, and it has this brilliant flavor of cherry. So that's where we'll start. The Corvina grape is a supporting cast member. And in most, I mean, I should point out, in most cases in around the wine world, you don't often have one grape that does all the work. There are certainly examples, but in most cases, wines are blends of things that do very well together. So Corvina, yeah, it by itself, it's fairly light in color, fairly monolithic. It has this really, really beautiful sour cherry profile, but it needs something else. So that something else comes in the form of other grapes. And there's another grape called Rondinella, and Rondinella has a little more tannic structure. It certainly has more color, and it has some other flavors, slightly vegetal flavors that, when blended, really complete this wine. So Valpolicella is always a blend. Corvina being the driver, Rondinella is usually blended in. Sometimes there's another grape called Molinara that gets blended in, but it needs more than one grape. So now we're not going to be tasting this, but it's worth pointing out. So Valpolicella is sort of like, think of that as this region's base wine. There are other variations of it. There is a style called Rapasso. So you might see like bottles that say Valpolicella Rapasso, and Rapasso is, again, knowing that some of the grapes in the blend don't have the structure needed to stand alone. And so what the winemakers in this area, again, the Greeks were the first winemakers in this area, so it's been going on forever. But one of the techniques that they use is they will take it's called pomace, but when you press grapes for making a wine, you're left with the solids and its stems and skins and seeds. And usually, if you're in the regions of northern Italy, that would be made into what's called grappa. They would actually press it again, distill it into a crazy high proof brandy, but make grappa out of that. In this case, they actually take that pomace, and they take pomace from a style of wine called Amarone, and we'll talk about that in a minute, or a style of wine called Recioto, and we'll talk about that too. So they take the grape solids left over from the previous fermentation, and they add it to essentially this wine, this base wine, this Valpolicella, the Corvina and Rondinella, and they then age it. They re-ferment it and age it again. And so you end up with a wine that has a little more body, a little extra booze, a little more structure because of the addition of that pomace. And so that's called a Rapasso. Rapasso means repressed. So, the Italians particularly, never want to waste anything. Everything has probably at least one, probably two uses. And so this was a way of making use of what would probably just get thrown back out into the vineyard as fertilizer. So that's Rapasso. The king or queen, I don't know which gender to apply to a wine, but of this region is a wine called Amarone. And Amarone is very much a product of its place. Amarone is they will harvest Corvina, Rondinella, Molinara, and then they will lay them out on straw mats. And these mats are they're actually, it sort of looks like very narrow shelves. But they will lay the grapes out on the mats, and they will let them, they usually expose them to outside air. Sometimes it's a sheltered area, so it's not, they're not sitting outside, but it's outside air. And the grapes dehydrate, they raisinate. And this is a technique that they learned actually from the Greeks. The Greeks didn't have the ability to always process their wines as quickly as possible. It's fairly warm. There were times where the fruit that they had just harvested would raisinate, but they still wanted to use it, and they discovered actually it makes pretty nice wine. So this what they will do is, now in the region of Amarone, the fruit there, again, Corvina, Rondinella, has fairly thick skin, and this skin actually enables this process to occur very easily. So they raisinate these grapes, and then they press them, and it not much juice is left, but there is juice. It gets pressed, it gets aged in barrel, in some cases for many years. And this process of partially dehydrating the grapes before pressing concentrates the sugars and flavors and really makes some impressive wines. So Amarone is a wine that is again partially dehydrated, but because of that dehydration, these wines age and age and age and age. In fact, there's a famous producer, Bertani, who as World War II was invading their property, they hastily gathered up all of their Amarone and buried it, and then abandoned the winery. And this was discovered, I think, in the 80s or 90s. They found this pit, and the wine was still beautifully preserved, and some of the Bertani family's most prized possessions today. But so this wine, again, on the nose, lots of cherry. If you're drinking Valpolicella, Amarone, or any of the Ripasso wines, cherry should be the lead off. You get a little bit of dried herb, Italian herbs, so think herbs de Provence, French, but those same flavors, aromas rather, thyme, rosemary, sage, maybe some floral, but leads off with cherry. And then there's a little bit of a vegetal note, and then there's this beautiful like chocolate earthiness. And as Jack mentioned earlier on, when years ago, when our beloved burger stand downtown in downtown Lawrence was located at Dempsey's, the owner of Dempsey's asked us to come and pair wines with the burgers. And Jamie and I, my business partner and I, pulled a whole bunch of samples, and they brought us a massive bag of burgers, and we just sat there nibbling on burgers and tasting wine. And there were a lot of good wines. I mean, yeah, that worked. But the one that absolutely floored us was Valpolicella with I think it was a bacon mushroom burger with, I think we concluded it was Swiss or Gruyere, but the connection between that wine and that burger was undeniable. I mean, we had sales reps who came by as we were tasting. We're like, you got to try this. And everybody was like, I never would have thought. But if you smell it, I mean, it sort of has this grilled hamburger smell. Like there's this grilled beef smell. And there's an earthiness like the mushrooms, and there's a bacon fat thing going on, and it's got acidity that provides juiciness to wash away the fat. I mean, it was just, I know that the people of Verona and Valpolicella and Venice are not touting the best pairing that you should have is something the Americans came up with, but damn if it doesn't work. It really it was truly one of the best. I mean, I to this day it's one of my most favorite food pairings. Just because I mean, I mean, my mouth waters as I smell this because I can almost smell this burger.
I can vouch for it because
Mm.
that's what I'm enjoying right now while I'm drinking it, and it's I don't understand it. All I know is it's
I don't
delicious
understand.
with it.
It really, I mean, it was, I think we even pulled this bottle because it was a price point, and it was Allegrini. It was a different bottling. I mean, obviously it wasn't this vintage, but it was a different bottling that they did, but it was simply Corvina and Rondinella. So the same grapes, same winery. And it was just like, this is amazing. I could crush this all day. If I owned a burger joint, I would serve one wine. 100%. That would be it. It's like we only sell one thing. Um, but yeah, no, it's God, that's so funny. I mean, it makes me hungry for hamburgers. Um, so if you really want to,
I hate to be un-American, Steve, but I got to tell you, this wine with this burger is much better than a beer with this burger.
yeah,
Honest to God.
no, listen, well, I've always made the argument, barbecue, I get it. Barbecue and a beer is delicious. I won't deny that, but there are some barbecue and certain wines next level. Like it just does more than a beer does. And yeah, I mean, this burger gets super gentrified with just a couple sips off this glass.
There is a question that came up earlier when you were talking about the pumice. How do they hold the pumice and for how long?
Oh, yeah. So they want to use it pretty quickly because it is you don't want it to start drying out. When it dries out, it actually oxidizes and creates off flavors. So the pumice is they will stagger if they know that they've got some pumice. I mean, the pumice can stay in the tank for a while. Usually, I mean, if they can when they're ready to barrel the wine, so they've fermented it and they're removing the solids, they can allow that to settle out. Sometimes they'll press it out. I mean, almost like a French press kind of thing, but they will keep it in contact with liquid. They do not want it to dry out, but they will try to stagger it such that they know they're going to be, dumping one tank at the same time or around the same time that they're going to start the fermentation on the next tank. But yeah, you don't it most times. I mean, it's funny. There's a lot of awareness of what's called native yeast. And for the most part, when a winery touts that they don't inoculate with a sterile yeast, and the thing is, there's nothing wrong with sterile yeast. I mean, sterile yeast is just a yeast that's been cultured in a lab, and everything that's not that yeast gets knocked out, and it's just pure. It's not there's nothing different about it other than it's a very pure version of that yeast strain. But wineries that will tout that they don't inoculate and that they use native yeast, in most cases, it really is just this pumice, which has yeast on it, which has fermented a wine that gets dumped back out in the vineyard as compost. That's really how, in most cases, this native yeast takes hold. It is returned to the vineyard, and so that yeast then takes over in the vineyard, and it becomes the dominant yeast. And then they have no problem using native yeast. They bring the grapes in. The grapes have that yeast bloom on them, and they ferment it, and it works just as well as laboratory yeast. But no, the reusing of pumice, I mean, it's a, like I said, the other, I mean, there are some other areas, several other areas actually, where they will utilize this technique. But in most cases, it goes out to the vineyard, or it becomes a brandy, where they will press it again. And for anybody who's had a grappa, grappa it's wonderful. It's crazy high alcohol. You don't want to indulge in too much of it, because it's like rocket fuel. But if it's done well, it actually is the very pure expression of the flavor of those grapes. So northern Italy is really into grappa. You know, it's a very traditional thing to finish a meal with a shot of grappa, and it will be grapes that grow Barbera, Nebbiolo, Dolcetto, Moscato, grapes from Piedmont and areas of that. Although they make grappa in Tuscany as well. Yeah, no, it's just a great reuse of the grapes, but it's probably more of an issue where the wine needs a little extra stuffing. As I said, Corvina by itself probably would not be a wine that we would love. It would have, almost a rosé color, not a lot of dry tannin. Red wine generally needs some level of tannin. In this case, being a cool climate grape, some of that backbone is acidity, but it needs a little tannin to kind of bring that together. And so yeah, the Ripasso technique, which again, the Greeks brought that technique. It works very well.
Yeah, I don't mean to get too much on the grappa thing, but it's a favorite digestive for me. But I've noticed when I first had some, compared to what's going on now, I guess it's different. I'm not sure, but I see a lot of it that's made specifically with Chardonnay or whatever, and they're much smoother and more drinkable. And the grappa that I was used to is rocket fuel. I mean, if you don't throw it down, it's going to take your tongue out.
Yes.
But it's the best. I mean, if you don't have room for dessert and you have a grappa, you'll have room for dessert.
Yes. Yes.
So therefore, it's a good thing.
Right. No, I guess, I mean, I've had some grappa that I just can't recognize. The grappas I love the most are the ones where you taste it and you immediately know the grape. I mean, it's crazy high alcohol, but you can smell, if you smell past the alcohol aromas, your nose is still intact. You smell the fruit, and that's really cool stuff. Yeah, grappa, we used to have a fairly good supply, and typically grappa is not supposed to be, $70 a bottle, and there's a lot of grappa on the market now that really is way more expensive than it should be. And it's funny, there was a producer who brought in some grappa that or a distributor who brought in some grappa, and I have a customer who's from Piedmont, and I said, "Hey, we got this new grappa," and he looked at it and he shook his head, and he's like, no. He doesn't speak fluent English, but he's like, sticky on your hand, that grappa. So it's like adhesive remover is what he was saying. It wasn't the greatest review, but I'm like, you will never see this grappa at my store again. Thank you very much for your honesty. But yeah, no, grappa is a wonderful thing.
So do we have any opinions on the red here? Up, down?
Yeah, and it's like the
Getting
burger.
some.
The burger is just one example. Pasta with red sauce, delicious. Pasta with meat sauce, delicious. Hard cheeses, delicious. I mean, it's got fruit and a little bit of earth and some vegetal, which means it's going to cover a lot of territory. But it's a wine that, like I said, it's not, and if you ever have an Amarone, I mean, it's a very rich, full-bodied wine, and it just defies. You don't expect it to be as full-bodied as it is, given this, again, this region that is mountainous and adjacent to water and definitively a cool climate region. The techniques that they use, they're able to create these really full-bodied wines. The downside is Amarone, because of it is a little, well, is a lot more labor intensive. The grapes, again, have to be laid out on mats and raisinated. So Amarone is $70 to $100+ a bottle. It does get a little pricey, but they last forever. And they're the old producers of this area really, I mean, those wines, I will say, in many cases, I have customers come in who've not had a ton of familiarity, not ton of experience with Northern Italian wines or even Italian wines, and they have an Amarone in a restaurant, and they're like, that was amazing. And so I guess I would say the Amarone would be this wine just on steroids, where all of those flavors are more concentrated, more intense, more layered. The body a little, I mean, fuller bodied than this, but I wanted, I mean, I picked this wine because I wanted kind of you to see, again, the base wine. What is Valpolicella just as its base? Because that's, this is before it becomes a Ripasso or before it becomes an Amarone. You get to see the evolution, but I strongly urge you to track down some of those wines. They really are delicious. Great food wines, phenomenal food wines.
So is the Valpolicella from the same geographical area as the Soave, or is it?
For the most part, I mean, yes, they are. The Soave is mostly hillside. Valpolicella includes hillsides, but is not exclusively hillside. Now, there is a region, I mean, this Allegrini does one that I don't know why I could not, I mean, we don't have it in available to us, but they do a Valpolicella Classico. And anytime you see Classico on an Italian wine label, it basically means the area traditional of, so Chianti Classico. The region of Chianti has expanded, so there are a lot more Chianti producers today than there were classically. And so the Classico are the regions that are oldest and most traditional. So there is a Valpolicella Classico. And I want to say that for that region, there may be, I know there are different quality standards. There may be a higher concentration of Corvina. It may be 80%, but anyway, look out for Valpolicella Classico. And really, I'm kind of a traditionalist, so I like a lot of the Italian Classico regions for that very reason that they are a reflection of how it has been done traditionally.
We have a couple new comments and questions. One of the comments is they really like the smoothness of the red wine,
Yeah.
which I would agree.
Yeah,
The
no.
other, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I mean, this is it really is a nice balance of acidity and tannin. A real dialed in balance, and that's where you get that smoothness. So the tannin is not aggressive. I mean, tannin is needed in red wine. It helps provide structure. But it can be, tannin can be a lot of different things. I mean, tannin is the same thing that makes chocolate bitter. Now you've got like bittersweet chocolate, and then you've got baker's chocolate. Baker's chocolate, crazy bitter, needs sugar, needs something else. But the tannin is like that. A little goes a long way, and you get that right balance between tannin and acid, and you hit just this silkiness, like chocolate ganache. Ganache has this really, really richness to it, but it's smooth, and it's not like you're chewing on, the baker's chocolate that I did when when my mom would bake, and I would it'd be little blocks would be sitting around, and I grab a piece and chew on it, and um it's really dry. But that's that smoothness. Your other question.
The other question was, where can I get grappa? So I
So
don't know.
I think I have one or two in the store at the moment. There was a grappa producer. It was phenomenal. Like they were maybe 3.7, so half bottles, pints size. So it wasn't a lot. You didn't need much, but they were really, really well. I mean, they were really delicious grappas, and they were all varietally specific. Um, we, like I said, I think I have one or two. They're not the grappas that I wish I had, because they're good, but they're a little pricier than I would like them to be. There's some grappas that we can get that are just obscene. I mean, they are they're from very famous vineyards, which that's very cool. However, grappa was never meant to be a special occasion thing. It was, hey, let's not throw this away, and we'll make something out of it. And so the grappas that a couple grappas that I have, I mean, they're from very famous vineyards, but you have to appreciate that vineyard to appreciate that grappa. I mean, I like it, but it's not something that I think it's not a populist grappa. So it kills
And
me
when
to
you
say
see
this.
the small bottle, understand you drink this like an aperitif. You don't drink this
Right,
like a glass of wine.
right. I mean, yeah, you only need about an ounce. I mean, it's literally like a shot,
Yeah.
because it is wicked high proof. And it's not something, I mean, it you notice it when you're drinking it. I mean, you can feel it, but I mean, it's water of life. It's the eau de vie. I mean, that's
I I
it.
uh I feel like if you're an imperial beer drinker
Hmm?
because you like the taste of alcohol, you'll
Yeah,
like grappa.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, yeah, if you like high proof whiskeys, if you like triple IPAs. I mean, it's some, if you like espresso, it's a it it's a fully fortified. Yeah. But no, unfortunately, like I said, I wish I had some. I wish I had some grappas that I really love. I don't at the moment. I've got some stuff that, again, there's a very famous producer in Piedmont, it's called Gaia. And their wine, Gaia's wines are hundreds of dollars a bottle. I've got some grappa for $60 from one of theirs, but that's not the essence of grappa. Grappa is really, it should be 20 bucks for a pint, 25 bucks for a pint that tastes good and doesn't scorch your taste buds in the process. I mean, I unfortunately, grappa is not a huge seller in Kansas, and so I yeah, I wish we had better stuff, but
Yeah, I kind of associate it with tiramisu, which was originally everybody's dessert made out of leftovers and is now an expensive dessert in high-priced
Right.
restaurants. Grappa was everybody's aperitif or digestif that everybody drank, and it was cheap. The first time I had it was in New York, and then I had it once in Italy, and it was very reasonable. And then I started seeing $70 bottles and $80 bottles.
Yeah. No, I grappa, I mean, I there are a lot of producers that have gotten into the business of taking Italian producers that gotten in the business of taking their trophy wines, again, wines that they would sell for 75 or 100 plus or 200 plus dollars a bottle. And well, we were going to throw this out into the vineyard, but we'll press it again, distill it, put it in a half bottle, in a 375 milliliter bottle, and we'll sell it for $75, and that's free money. And yeah, I mean, I my guess is the notion of grappa was, we've had dinner, I've served you my wine, I want to send you off with something that, as you're walking home on a cold Piemontese night, you'll still be warm because this will keep you warm. And I'll give you a little shot of grappa, and that's my final farewell. And I think, yeah, that's how it should be. That was the objective. The objective was, this is just one final little, like, kiss from the meal. And it's become something else. But yeah, if I can get any grappa, I will absolutely let you know. By the way, I wanted to, before we're done, I wanted just to point out a funny thing. And maybe I already said this, I don't think I did, but last March or April, we tasted wine from New Zealand. We had a Sauvignon Blanc and a Pinot Noir from New Zealand. Well, the reason that we picked that is because those wines arrived in they're 6 months ahead of us, and those wines arrived. Actually, I've got the current vintage, the 2023 vintage of that same wine that we had the 22 of. So it arrived in December, January-ish, and we had it, I think, in March. Well, the funny thing is, that wine, that it was Grey Wacky. That wine was named the number 9 wine of the year by Wine Spectator. And the funny thing is, it had already been sold out because people had been drinking on it for all year. But you all had that experience, so you had the number 9 wine of the year before it was known as the number 9 wine of the year from Wine Spectator.
But
But
Steve knew.
but no, the thing is, we all tried it, and I know that, I mean, that wine, that was the first time I'd had that wine,
It was good.
and it really it caught me off guard. I was like, that is really a delicious wine, and other people agreed. But the funny thing is, when the Wine Spectator Top 100 Wines of the Year comes out in November, most of those wines have already been consumed and are gone. I have none left in my store, and I actually bought extra because I really wanted to have it through Christmas. I was not able to have it through Christmas, so but anyway, so you were able to taste a great wine before it was known to be a great wine. But I think when that came out, I was like, if more people had just tried the wine, they would have come to the conclusion themselves. So my request to you is just keep drinking wine, ignore reviews, ignore things like that, and just let your palate be the guide.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments about this evening's wines? Okay, I don't see any. So I will couple things. I will remind you, we do have, I know it's getting close to the end of the year and close to the holidays. And of course, I couldn't help myself. We do have 3 more events coming up next week. Monday, we have Stitch and Bitch for those of you who knit. Tuesday, we have Gray Anatomy on sleep apnea and sleep disorders. And Wednesday, we have Dessert in a Movie with the movie The Man Who Invented Christmas. And our guest will be a retired professor from KU who's a Dickensian specialist, talking about the reality of that period and how close that movie hit it. That should be really interesting. She's also a relatively new member of our association here. So looking forward to those. I want to take this chance, since this is the last occasion, to thank Steve for a wonderful 2023 of wine tasting. I know I learned a lot and tasted a tremendous amount of wines and learned stuff I never thought I'd learned. I'm getting close to almost having the smallest idea of what I really need to know about wines. But I want to thank for that, and really looking forward to a 2024 with all new experiences. So thank you all for joining us this evening. No more questions. We'll just give Steve our traditional round of applause silently, or you can unmute if you choose. And we'll see you all at whatever next event you choose to join our group with.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
appreciate
Steve.
that.
The burger was delicious with it. That's all I can tell you.
Awesome.
Have a great
You all.
evening, everyone. See you later.
Cheers.